So we can specify the address of the server by using the file name as a kind of a identifying the server with which the client would like to connect to. In the case of IP sockets or networking sockets, we specify the IP address. There are different ways. Basically, IP address is a 4-byte number, 4-byte number. And for understanding purposes, that 4-byte number is written as a dotted decimal notation in the form of a quad, right? 4 numbers separated by a dot, it is actually indicated. So every byte is represented as a number dot, another number dot, and so on. Because it is a byte there, the maximum possible value is 255. Considering that to be an unsigned number, 0 to 255 are the possible values for each byte. So in the form of a dotted decimal notation, that is going to be specified. And we also require a port number in the case of network sockets. In the case of the network sockets, we also require the port number. Because in the case of the Unix sockets, you don't have to identify the machine. The machine is already identified because whatever is the machine on which the program is running, that machine itself is going to be the client as well as the server. Both programs will run on the same machine. So you don't have to specify the machine or you don't have to identify the machine in the case of a what you call Unix sockets. Only you have to identify the process. To identify the process, you are selecting the file name as a unique mechanism. So because only one, one server can work on one socket, and that file name is going to be identifying mechanism. In the case of the network sockets, because you are working on a network, you can connect to any of the machine on the network and identify a process on that particular machine. So machine is identified in the case of what you call machine is identified by using the IP address in the case of internet sockets. So IP address is a mechanism to identify the machine on the network. But then you have to identify the process also because it is the inter-process communication. So process is identified by the port number. Port number is a mechanism to identify the process. So that way, like it is a combination. IP address coupled with port number is going to identify uniquely a particular process. And then client and server can always talk to them and so on like that. So those are the mechanisms which we have already talked about. Let us continue on the same. So if you take a look into the syllabus part of it, this unit number 4 is where we are actually, but we have not done with unit number 3 or whatever, semaphores, that kind of stuff. We have not yet started. But network, this is the one what we are actually currently working on. Network IPC, right? Inter-process communication using the network. That's what you are talking about. Introduction to Unix sockets. We have already done that. IPC over a network. We are still on the job. Client server model. Right? We have written many client programs and server programs. Address formats using Unix domain and internet domain. Both we have seen. There are two different structures, right? Two different structures are there. Struct followed by sock addr underscore un and uh, struct followed by sock addr underscore in, un and in, different address structures. And then we have seen how to use a socket system call for connection oriented. So what we have done so far is connection oriented because we have used sock stream. Sock stream is a mechanism for connection oriented like communication basically. There is another one, datagram based communication, which we will study slowly. Socket system calls for connectionless. That we have to yet to do that. And then example, client server programs we have seen. Single server client connection. This is what we have seen so far. One server, one client. So normally what we have written is server is going to receive a request from the client, do the service, and then close that particular thing, go back and wait for new connection. So server is either waiting for the new connection or doing the like the service requested from the client. Only one of them is it's going to be doing. So normally, what if the server is currently servicing one of the client? Then if any client is interested, because many clients can try to connect to the server simultaneously. So if the client want to connect to the server, when the server is busy servicing another client, right, then that client may miss, right, that. It's going to get a busy kind of thing and all that. So for that, we have to actually go for something called concurrent calls, concurrent servers, iterative server and concurrent servers, we call them. Iterative server means it's going to get a request from the client, do the service, and again come back and all that. It's going to do that in a sequence actually. Whereas a concurrent server means, so the server will be accepting for new connections from the socket, from the clients, and simultaneously it is also capable of doing the required service to other clients. So that is concurrent mechanism. Normally we do that either by using fork system call, so that you create a new process to serve a client, whereas the main process is always busy waiting for connections from the clients. So you always set aside a different process so that that process can be busy or like doing the service, and the moment the service is over, the process will be closed or will be exited, and the main process will continue accepting the connections. So that's what we will be doing, concurrent kind of thing. That we have to yet to actually do that, multiple simultaneous clients. So we'll be doing that. Socket options by using a system called setsock opt, getsock opt, fcntl system call, all that. So we are almost coming to the completion of the network programming as far as socket programming is concerned, somewhat close to that particular thing. Let's now go back to this particular thing. So I think all of you are slowly following, and if you just take a look into the structures, address formats, right? So this is the address format for internet structure. Struct sock addr underscore in is the address structure for internet. How do you invoke the socket system call? Is like the socket of AFINET comma sock string comma 0. How do you fill all the values corresponding like the structure variable dot sin underscore family is AFINET. Socket internet. SIN stands for socket internet. SUN stands for socket Unix. Right? Remember that way. So, and then corresponding variable dot sin underscore addr dot s underscore addr. So that is the actual integer value. So inet underscore addr is going to convert the dotted decimal notation in the form of string back into an integer value. Inet underscore addr of this entire thing. And then port number is source. Length of the structures. They vary from different for different form addresses. The length is different. So we also pass on the length of the structure so that the bind system call understands. So what is the kind of technology that you are actually using based on the length, based on the length of that particular. So you can see here how you are binding. Binding is a mechanism of naming the naming the address. So bind of corresponding socket descriptor and then address of the structures and then the length of the corresponding structure. This is what we have actually done that. There is one important thing that we have not yet actually talked about, right? All the programs, whatever we have written, they don't work all the time. In the sense that the computers actually, there are two different types of computers in this world. Based on the way integers are stored internally into the computer systems. Integers, if it is a byte, no problem, single byte. But if it is a multi-byte kind of thing, that means either short integer having 2 bytes or long integer having 4 bytes, how do you store them into the computer? So based on that, there are two different types of computers, two different types of processors, microprocessors or whatever. That is what is being talked about here. So you have like Intel processor based Linux machines, and you also have something called Mac kind of thing. Your Apple systems, they actually store different Apple machines and all that Mac systems. Again, the exact output may vary among different versions of Linux and all that he is actually talking about. So what we are actually talking about is the following. How to tell that to you is there anything here? So all that is being talked about in a byte order kind of thing. So let me give it to you here. So Excel sheet. Okay, so let me explain what we are actually talking about. So there is a, let us assume that there is a variable called x. There is a variable called or x or m. Let us assume that m is a variable, an integer variable, which actually stores 4 bytes, just like your what we call internet address. IP address is a 4-byte kind of. This requires some address, right? The variable m requires an address. Imagine that its address is 1000. 1000 is the starting address. 1000 is the starting address means all the addressing is done in terms of the bytes. So in the address location 1000, there will be one single byte. Address location 1001, there will be another byte. Location 1002 contains another byte. 1003 contains another byte. So that means the variable m is allocated 4 bytes, considering that it is an integer kind of thing. So for example, let me also write all that, an integer kind of thing. So 4 bytes are allocated to this. Now that you are actually storing an integer value like IP address like 127.0.0.1. 127.0.0.1. One way of storing the address or the value is like this, 127.0.0.1. This is one way of storing. That means in the least significant address, you are storing the most significant byte. You are storing the most significant byte. In the next address, you are storing the next this thing, and in the highest address, you are storing the least significant value. This is one mechanism. There is another way in which the same value can be stored, wherein you store 1 here, 0 here, 0 here, and 127 there. 127 there. You have another machine, another processor in this particular way also. Right? So both of them are correct in their own aspect. So as far as calculations within the same machine, nothing goes wrong. Nothing goes wrong. Because for all purposes, like the processor interprets in that particular way. So that means the same number 127.0.0.1 is stored in one architecture in this particular way, in another architecture in this particular way. So the actual problem comes when you are running client program on one machine and server program on another machine of different types like this. Then the numbers are interpreted differently, and when you are actually sending over the network, right? So there will be what it is differences the way that things are handled. So that's the reason why. So whenever you are sending over a network, so like information regarding multi-byte data, essentially. If it is a character data, no issue. If it is a byte-oriented data, no issue. But when you are transferring numbers like this, so one should actually try to convert these numbers into some what it is, into some standard format, and that standard format is called as networking format, networking order. So anything that you are actually sending over the network, you should convert that data into networking format, so So you require now mechanisms to convert data from your host machine to the network format. Similarly, you require mechanisms to convert data from networking format to back to your host format, back to your host. So that's where like what it is. These conversion routines are helpful actually. You can see here, there are a number of conversion routines to enable computers of different types to agree on values for multi-byte integers transmitted over a network. You need to define a network ordering. Client and server programs must convert their internal integer representations to the network ordering before transmission, right? And they do this by using the functions that are available in net-inet/in.h. This is not required for Unix socket because you will be running both client as well as server on the same machine. No issue. But the problem comes only when you are running over a network, and when a client is running on one type of machine, server is running on a different type of a machine, then you require this. If by any chance you are quite sure that all your clients and all your servers will run on the same type of machines, they will all run on Intel machines, then you don't have to buy. But the trouble comes when you are actually offering a very good service where over the world anybody can connect to your machine. Then you can't say that if you want to use my service, you have to buy an Intel machine, right? So that's why you have to actually use these routines to convert the data in that particular fashion. So you can see very easily H2NL means host to network, long integer. You are converting a long integer from host to network. Host means your machine, your host machine. Network, right? Host to network, long integer. And then you are converting unsigned long integer into this particular list. So simply use that. Whenever you want to pass on an integer, a long integer over a network, first convert that, and converted data must be sent over the network. Similarly, host to network, short integer. Host to network, short integer. Sorry. Okay, so that is regarding the host, because you have short integer having 2 bytes, long integer having 4 bytes to be converted into network format. Similarly, after getting the data from the network, you must convert that back into your host machine format. That you do it by using N to H, network to host, long integer, network to host, short integer. This also you have to do that. So that's the reason why all your what you call data that you are storing into the structures, they must also be converted. Because over a network, you will be sending not only your data, but you will also be sending your own addresses. Your own addresses also are going to be sent over a network. So those things also must be properly converted. So you are saying H2NL of INADD or any in order to receive the connections from any of the clients. Similarly, H2NS of port number. H2NS of port number. And remember, INET underscore ADDR will always convert that into network byte order. So no need to do anything. No need to do anything regarding this particular thing. So by doing all this, you have to write the program. You have to make necessary changes to the earlier programs, in fact. So the changed programs, let us see whether do we have changed programs here or not. We don't have. Right now, if you see here, port number is 9734. Instead of this, let us see whether do we have server 3 by any chance in that. Right. So in this we have the corresponding thing. This is server 3. Similarly, client 3. Its corresponding thing. Client 3 also. Okay. So client 3, here you can understand now easily. INET underscore ADDR of 127 and then host to network. So this you have to do. This is the correct program which will work on all the machines over a network. Whereas if you give simply 9734, then on some machines it may not work. Right? So that you have to pay attention to. And if you are sending data over a network, any number kind of thing, numbers also must be first converted. If you are sending only character data or byte oriented data, no need to worry. But the other day we have written how to find the square of a number. So if you are passing a number over a network, first you must convert that number into network format. And then the other side, whenever the server knows that it is receiving a number, it should convert that received number into host format. And then do the required calculation or whatever. And again, convert that host number back into network format. And then, And then actually send the reply back to the client. So all that you have to actually do that. So these are the details. Whereas the server details, if you see, you can see here, socket of AFINET sock stream 0. AFINET is a family. And then H2NL of in ADDR NE. Right? This is the address of the server. So whenever the server is actually interested in receiving requests from any client any client running on the network, then you have to specify in ADDR underscore NE. This is mostly same as that of your 127.0.0.1 actually. So you can specify that particular thing. Similarly, port number, you have to convert that. H2NS of 9734, whatever number. This port number, it is up to you. Except that server and client both should know that or use the same port number. Then only IPC will happen between that client and this server as a part of that. And here if you take a look into, you are actually waiting for connections from the clients. After getting the request from the client, then you are actually doing the required service. You are reading the requested data, doing the required calculation, giving the reply back to that, closing the connection, and again going back. So either you are busy waiting for new connection or doing a service to one of the client, but you are not doing both. So when you are busy here doing some service, if any client request comes, the server is not ready here actually. So you may, one of the client may lose. It may think as if the server is not there, kind of it. Yes, there is a provision for a queue by using a listen for something like this. So as many as 5 requests might be there in the queue, right? If more than that is going to come, then it is going to drop it, kind of it. So those issues are there. For that, what people normally do is to fork a new process so that one, like the main process is busy accepting connections, and the child process is going to actually serve the the client basically. So this is actually single server, single client kind of thing. So this example is meant for that particular thing. Whereas probably, let us see whether do we have 4 server 4 and client 4 kind of thing. Do we have it? Do we have something here as a part of it? And then client 4. Client 4. Client 4 may not be required because it's the same client that's going to work. Most likely client 2 with that particular thing. 2 is there. 3 also is there. So we will use 3 here as a part. 3 is already there. Okay. No issue. So this is not required then. We can cancel it. So client 3 and server 4. We'll have to pay attention. This is client 3 and server 4. Client 3 is what it is doing. It is connecting to 9734 with all appropriate connections, conversions and all that. Host to network, all that. It is requesting a character to be converted into the next valuable character there and all that. So you're writing onto that, reading from that, and then printing, whatever. Okay, wonderful. So let us now take a look into the multiple kind of thing. Right. So before coming to this program, probably we can take a look into the actual program here from the text as a part of it. This is all network information and all that. Not interested in this. Right, multiple clients. This is the one we are actually talking about. You have seen how you can use sockets to implement client-server systems, both locally and across networks. Once established, socket connections behave like low-level open file descriptors, many ways like bidirectional pipes. You might need to consider the case multiple simultaneous clients connecting to a server. So whereas the server, what is happening here? A server program accepts a new connection from a client. A new socket is created, and the original listen socket remains available for further connection. If the server doesn't immediately accept further connection, they will be held pending in a queue. Right? So the fact that original socket is still available and that sockets behave as a file descriptor gives you a method of serving multiple clients at the same time. If the server calls for to create a second copy of itself, the open socket will be inherited by the new child process. Right? So the child process is going to inherit the socket, the child socket, whatever is there, like your what it is, client request, whatever is there for communication purpose, you can safely fork off. It can then communicate with the connecting client while the main server doing all that. This is one way of doing it. The other way is you can also do something called multi-threaded programming. Mostly people will actually prefer multi-threaded programming instead of multiple processes, because creating a new process is it takes more resources actually. It takes more resources. So, and time wise also is going to be slow. So, whereas we don't have a multi-threaded kind of thing in our syllabus, we are not talking about that. But fork, we have already done that. That's why this type of a solution is actually offered. So, because you are creating a child process but not waiting for them to complete, you must arrange for the server to ignore child signals to prevent zombie processes. Right? So, you are not waiting for the child and all that. So, that's why, so anything coming from a child, a kind of a signal, you want to ignore that particular thing. So, that part also is taken care. Now, let us take a look into that. Simple solutions only are being discussed here so that you can understand the main theme about how to, what it is, take care of networking part of it rather than the solution being offered. Right. Now, coming to this, you have integer server socket file descriptor, client socket file descriptor, corresponding lengths, corresponding structures. Right? So, it's straightforward. Server sock FD equal to socket of AF and sock stream, 0. Straightforward. And then fill the address with appropriate values. So, server address dot SIN family AFINET, server address, internet address is HTNL of INLD or any. And then the port number is HTNS of 9734. And then find out the length of the structure so that it's going to be passed as a parameter to the bind system call. So bind of server socket FD, address of the server address and the length. Listen for server socket. As many as 5 different things can be there in the queue. Now, because it is a multiple clients request kind of thing, you want to ignore that. That is being talked about here. Signal of SIG-CHLD and SIG_IDL. You are ignoring the completion of the child process. Right? Basically, you don't want to attend to that. But at the same time, no zombie process must be created. So it should be cleared. It should be cleared as a part of it. So that's why here the child will inform the parent process. So because it is already informed, so the zombie process won't be created. So parent process is not doing anything as a part of it. Right? So this is one kind of solution. It's not that all the programs must be written like this. This is only a part of it. So now while one, character CH, server waiting, then now the client addresses also are going to come. So you have to find out size of the client address and then accept of server socket, and then to get the corresponding client address, you have to pass on the address. To get the structure length and all that, you have to pass on the address of the client also. Right? So this is same. There is no change so far actually. But once you get the request from the client, then the socket is ready. Client socket is ready. Meaning that for communication purpose, the socket is ready. So if the socket is ready now, that socket can be passed on to the child. How do you pass on to the child? Whenever you create a fork, already the other day we talked about that all the created descriptors, all the opened file descriptors are passed on to the child also. Main parent will have access to the file descriptors. Child also will have access to all the file descriptors. So that's the reason why immediately after this you are creating a child process. If fork equal to 0, what do you mean by that? This code is going to be executed by the child process, because fork returns 0 in the child process. Fork returns child process ID to the parent process. So this code is going to be executed by the child only. So what is the job of the child? Job of the child is straightforward. Attend to the child request. So that means you are reading data sent by the client. So you are actually reading. Read of client sock FD ampersand CH1. And then you are simulating here actually, as if this might take random time. This might take more time and all that. So you are actually sleeping for 5 seconds. And then increasing the value. This is as if you are think of as if the client is server and client are doing some job which takes some time. Maybe you have to connect to the database, get the data from there, do some calculations, and then give the reply. That kind of stuff. Not as trivial as reading a character and increasing the value and sending reply that and all that. This kind of job can easily be done by the client itself. So you are basically simulating here. You're sleeping for 5 seconds means if it is the same thing is done in the normal sequence without the 4, then 5 seconds you are wasting, in which time other many clients might actually pour in. So you will lose all of them. That's the reason why you are actually going for multiple processes. You are creating a 4. So CH++, write and close and then exit. This exit is you are exiting the child process. This is the only new thing that you are actually adding. So that child process will take care of attending to the request, and the parent process. Parent process, where will it go? It will actually not go into this if part. It will skip, because in the parent fork value is greater than 0. So it will come to else what? Else, as you can see, this is the parent part. So child will attend to the client. So you are closing here, close of client sock FD. Close of client sock FD in the parent process. And then it is going back to the while loop. It is going back to the while loop. So again, this is going to be printed, and again, it's going to immediately go for accepting the new command. Immediately go for accepting the new command. So it is as simple as this actually, addressing the multiple requests from several clients. And when you run this, as you can see, you run the server 4 program in the background and you run the client 3, right? So client 4, you don't have any client 4. Clients are the same programs, right? So that's why you are using the client 3 here. Why not client 2? Client 2, you are not addressing the network byte ordering and host byte ordering. You are not doing in client 2. So client 3 is the appropriate correct program actually, where host and network byte ordering are also addressed. So you are running the third program like in the background, 3 different programs. So they will all be running naturally. And when you see PS and all that, you see all of them are running. You can see that server 4 is running, client 3 times, as you can see, PSX, and then like again server 4 here as a part of it, for whatever reason. Like why is that you are getting like this? 26566 process ID. So that is server 4. Client 3 times, 26581, 26582, and then 26583. And then PSX is there, no issue. And then if you see, because whenever a request comes from client 3 to server 4, server 4 is creating a new process. It is creating a fork. So what is the program that is running in the child process? Same program. That is why, as you can see, another program is created here. It is because this /server 4 is there because of fork action. So that's why it has got its own process ID, 26585. So this will address one of the child, one of the client actually. This will address the other client. This will address one more client. Whereas this is the one that is actually taking care of receiving the request from the clients. Accept related thing is running here, whereas serving the request is being done by all these three. So you have to understand here, like even though you have executed server 4 program only once, but in the PS output, you are seeing server 4 being executed 4 times, because the server 4 parent process is creating a child process, and that child process is also running the same code. That's the reason why command is still /server 4, right? So this you have to understand. It's a very simple, and after some time, naturally, all these 3 server 4 programs will naturally be closed after attending to these 3 client requests. After attending to these 3 requests, these 3 server 4 programs will be naturally closed. And after some time, as you can see, this is the output, where the main server 4 is still running in a while loop, and PSX is the only thing. These 3 programs are done after some time, right? So this is as simple as that. Now we can actually take a look into the same thing here as a part of it. See here, if fork equal to 0, read from the client, sleep for 5 seconds, increase that, and so on like that. It is a very simple program. Okay. So now we can try to run this program also if required. Any questions at this stage?
No, sir.
Okay, so this is the explanation for the network byte ordering, post byte ordering, all that, right? So I can close this particular thing. Good, sir. Don't say. So we want to run this, so we have to open this and then change the directory into network program and IP. So we must have all those things. This is now server 4 and client 3. That's what we'll have to run it. Server 4, let us compile it. So probably I have not modified all those changes and all that. Just copied that. So those characters and all that, there is a problem. Let me attend to that particular. So server 4, there are issues. Issues are related to those double quotes and single quotes on. Let us slowly complete that particular part. So here, this is the one where you find a different character coming into that. And any other place, nothing. So this is the only thing. So save it, come back to this. Right, so this is taken care. So now copy this into a.out into server 4. Server 4 as such. Similarly, client 3 we require. Client 3 is, so C character I don't have, that's problem. That's why I'm just delaying as far as possible, but no issue. Client 3 dot C. So luckily everything is taken care here, and move A dot out to client 3. So this is also done. Now we can actually take care of this. And this one, now you run the server program in the background. Server 4 program in the background. So server is waiting. It's there. You can just take a look into by using PSAX. But there are so many programs like which are running there. We can actually reduce that by using all your daemon processes. Normally they run on like they run without a terminal. A question mark will be there for a daemon processor. The processes that run forever, right? So grep minus V actually followed by question mark. So when you give this, now you can see only limited things are there as a part of it. So what are the programs that are running? Server 4 is running and PS is running, these two. And back your main bus, whatever is there, that's still going on as a part of that. Now, whenever you run the client programs, so we have to run /client. Client means client 3. Run this in the background. And one or two more. So when you run all of them at once, naturally many things will try to communicate. Many programs would like to connect to the server. So what we will do is we will also send like this and then see what is the actual output of PS. Maybe, right? So PSAX. PSAX as a part of that. So maybe PS may be executed very fast, even before clients, in which case you may see only few things. But here PS output, you don't want everything, but those limited things so that, right? Otherwise, it's going to very quickly run away, right? Like this. I hope all of you understand what we are doing. We are running 3 client programs, all in the background, and running PS in the foreground, so that it's going to display what is going on there as a part of it, right? So now I will also remove this so that you will see all of that. Okay, so see here. So you can see all of them. Those are the things. Server is waiting, and you can see server 4, client 3, and again another server has come, as you can see, right? So all those things. Whereas now, if you run the same PS, again back to that, or probably we can see that even like this also. Same thing. Up to this we can give it, right? So run this. And now if you run it, now you can see. Now you can see here. Parent program is running. All the child programs are running. And forked child programs are also running here. These are the client programs. These are the child programs. Right? So that is what is being actually talked about in the textbook. So This is how you can understand concurrent programs are actually created there as a part of it. It is a very simple program, which you already know how to create child process by using the fork system call. So if fork equal to 0 means that it is a child process and child is attending to all of them. If it is otherwise, parent is going to close it. I hope all of you are slowly falling in line, trying to understand what is going on there as a part of it. Now let us move on to about how to write what it is, the datagram based kind of thing, right? Connectionless kind of thing. Connection oriented, we have seen so far all the programs. Connectionless, how to actually do that. For that, it is not that well given in the textbook actually. Textbook is using some services and all that, which require different for datagram based kind of thing. It's not that well written, but still let me take a look into and then see how we can actually address that, what is being talked about and all that. So multiple clients, I think all of you have understood what's going on there. You can easily follow this from this particular, a server for multiple clients, right? You understand the need of that and how to write the corresponding program. Now, datagram based kind of thing, it is there somewhere at the end of it. You can, multiple clients is, this is something different. Okay, by using the select and all that, you don't have a corresponding thing. That's why don't worry about fifth program. This is the datagrams aspect. So we have concentrated on programming applications that maintain connections to their clients using connection-oriented TCP socket connections all this time, whatever that we have done so far. But especially for getting simple services, you don't require full connection, right? Like, for example, you want to find time of the day. You don't require a full-fledged connection. Just send a packet request, and then the response will come in another packet back to the client. So datagram-based services will be good enough for many things. Like even for web-based kind of request also, send a request, get the service, get the response back. So in between there is a lot of wastage of time where no request, no service is going to be offered. Why do you require a connection for that? You don't require a complete connection for all of that. So in such cases, the datagram based services are good enough. So daytime, as you can see here, that's what is being talked about here. Daytime service is also available by UDP using datagram, right? And all that is being talked about. He's actually trying to provide the service by using standard services being offered on the machine, actually. But anyhow, like we will look into that particular part, which is different for datagram based kind of thing. Don't pay attention to all this particular part. It's not required. Post information, all these things as such. But actually look into, I will just tell you where you have to start worrying about. And we will write the program anyhow, our own program. So this is what you will have to actually do that. Whenever you create a socket, there is a difference between a connection oriented and connectionless. So you say socket of AF INI. It is the same even for connection oriented or connectionless, because this is going to talk about the domain actually. Internet domain or Unix domain. This is what it is. Now connection oriented or connectionless is talked about in the second parameter. Earlier it was SOC string. Now it is SOC underscore dgram, datagram. This is what you'll have to give it. So for datagram based sockets, you have to use second parameter as SOC underscore dgram. Third parameter as usual 0. Right? This is the only difference. as far as socket creation is concerned. And then address, how to fill the structure, address structure is still the same, no change. Right? To fill the address structure, same logic is used. AFINet, port numbers, and all that. Here, don't worry, like because he is using service based and all that. So these things are there, but it's not required actually. For us, we will use our own style of what it is. We will use our own kind of thing. But what is important is this filling the structure, no change, right? For the time being, don't pay attention to this. This is not what it is. But you understand it. There is no change from connection oriented to connectionless as far as filling the address structure is concerned. Only changes in the socket creation. After that, you have different system calls for sending and receiving requests for datagrams. For connection oriented, you have something called read and write we use. In order to get the data from the client, we use read. In order to send the response back, we use the write system calls. Whereas in the case of the datagram, there are two more system calls which are called send to and receive from. Send to and receive from. These two are important. So that means you want to send a packet to a server or the other side of the machine. Whenever you want to send something to the other side of the machine, because it is a client server program, right? When client want to send something to the server, you use send to. So in the send to, naturally, you have to give not only the data that you want to send, but you also have to give what is the server address or what is the address of the other side of the machine. That also you have to give. So you can see here, send to of, you are using the socket, meaning that from address is going to be available through this socket FD from this machine. Then what data you have to send? You are specifying about the buffer. And how many bytes starting from that address? 1 byte. It can be any number. In this case, he is sending a single byte anyhow. Third one is, this is the flags actually. Most of the time it's going to be 0. Up to this, you are only talking about what data is to be sent. But now, because this is not connection oriented, the other side is not known always to the socket. The other side you have to always pass it as a parameter. So you are passing the address of the other side as a parameter here. So ampersand address. This address will contain the address of the other side of the machine, where this data must be sent, data that is available in the buffer. And also specify the address, the corresponding structure length, all that. Whenever address comes, length also will be there. So this is how you actually use send to. So after sending a request, after sending the data to the other side, naturally the other side he will actually receive and then do some processing and give a reply. So that reply you should again get back, and that you can do that by using the receive from. So you are receiving the reply from the other side. So you say receive from of socket, and now whatever response that you get must be stored somewhere, that you are storing it into buffer. It can be anywhere, but here as a part of this logic, you are using buffer. But you should also specify what is the size of the buffer so that receive from do not actually overrun that particular buffer, right? As usual, we do even for the other file descriptors and all that. So you specify size of buffer. So don't receive not more than this many bytes. That's what you mean by flags is 0 as usual. And then receive from, because now you are going to get a packet, and the packet will contain the address from where the response is coming, and that if you want to capture, you can actually put that address. And because the incoming packet has got the details, so you have to update this, you specify the ampersand earlier. So this is how it is. Receive from. So you are assuming that probably, as you can see, what is the result here then? What is the result? The result is always the send to how many bytes of data that it has sent over the network. Right? The number of bytes that it has sent over the network, that is going to be returned by send to system call whenever it is successful. If it fails, it returns -1. Just like you use write system call returns the number of bytes written onto the descriptor, file descriptor. Similarly, send to returns the number of bytes sent by send to the other side, and that is available in result. Similarly, receive from returns what? Returns the number of bytes received from the other side, received from the network. How many bytes are received by this receive from? That is available in the result listing. And that many number of bytes are received into where? Into the address starting from this particular buffer. So that address you are actually specifying. So you are assuming that the other side of the user probably has not stored a null value at the end of the string and all that. So you are actually storing a null character also here. Buffer of result is equal to null character. So that whenever you use a printf, it's going to print only up to this particular place. If the other side of the fellow, if the client, if the server actually also attaches this null character as a part of that, then this is not required. It all depends upon the protocol here. If the other side server only sends the data only, not ending the data with null character, then here you have to take care of it. Otherwise, the other way is you can take care at the other end, either way. So here printf read so many bytes and the actual message is false. Result comma buffer. So this is how the datagram based things are going to work. Pay attention only to this much. We will write a separate program for that, but this is how things will work. Right? Socket of AIFinet sock diagram, fill the structures, send it to and receive from. That's all what you have to do it. That's all what you have to do that. So this is a datagram based kind of thing, which we'll have to write program and then do all that and so on, no doubt. But that part we will do it for the next class, writing the server and all that. Signatures, if you see here, signatures of the send to and receive from, this is what it is. Send to returns an integer value and it takes the parameters like socket file descriptor, first parameter. Second parameter is a void store so that it can receive any address. And then maximum of how many bytes can be received into this buffer. You have to specify that maximum. And then flags. Mostly, one of the flags that is going to be useful is whether you want to wait for the send to like whether it can be blocked system call or non-blocking system call. Right? So that control you can take it actually by using the flag, by using no wait kind of thing. Right? You can get out of that. That is the purpose of the flags. Many a times it's likely to be 0. And then you specify the address of the other side of the machine. And then the corresponding length, whatever. This is about send it to. Receive from also same thing. Receive from returns an integer, and these are the parameters, whatever. The difference is that the length is, now you have to pass on the address because you are receiving the address of the other side of the machine. Corresponding address structure length must be updated. So you have to pass on the address here. Whereas here, you are giving this information to this particular machine only, no issue. Whereas here, it's likely to be updated. That's why you have to pass on the address of that particular thing. So this is about the socket programming and all that. We have to complete the datagram part of it and so on. I think that may take a little bit time. So you also go through that when you come for the next class, so that datagram client and datagram server. You see, in fact, datagram client only can be written so that it can connect to a server. It's not necessary that datagram server will only talk to datagram client and all that. Datagram client can talk to a what I call stream-oriented servers also. So that whatever is the reply that is coming from the server is sent in the form of a packet. Right, even though it is writing by using the write system call, but it is converted into a packet and all that. That part we will see in the next class about how to take care of what it is datagram client and sock stream client, and the other side either it may be connection oriented server or connectionless server. So both issues in the next class I think we should be able to complete. And with that, maybe network programming using C language, we might come to an end. Later, Java is there. Like, I think all of you may have to put some effort to, what it is, understand the Java language. Already, I only taught you Java in the last semester. So, refresh yourself about how to write Java classes, main method there, and all that, because we cannot start from the basics. So whatever is required for network programming using Java, related classes are there. You will find some classes there, right? So you can see here, there is one full-fledged chapter. So unit number 5, network programming in Java, network basics, TCP sockets, UDP sockets, right? Connection oriented and connectionless socket. Server programs that can handle one connection at a time and multiple connections using multi-threaded servers. So this is what we'll have to do it. And RMI is there, remote method invocation, basic RMI process, client server application. So all this much is there, right? We may have to go into that particular thing. So go through the Java language a little bit, at least simple programs. Then we can cover the socket related stuff in our thing. So textbooks are there here as a part of that. So Unix system programming using C++ is not what is required. Probably yes, teach on. These books also you can refer. Actually, for network programming, the best book no doubt is this particular thing. Best book no doubt is this. Unix Network Programming by Richard Stevens. Excellent book. In fact, like we don't have here PDF version of that particular thing. We can get if we want. It's not that difficult. But Stone's also reasonably good book. That's why we have just followed it. So if you have this particular Richard Stevens, go through that. You should be able to follow it very easily. Right. So with this background today, like we'll close the session unless you have any questions from your end. Do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, so if nothing is there, then we can stop presenting and then stop the recording also.